Welcome to the third chapter of this PIAAC online tutorial. We are still working on our literature overview of PIAAC and applied economic research. The last two chapters that are linked below have looked at PIAAC-based research on education and labor market outcomes, as well as interesting subsample analyses. Finally, we're going to look at questions of causality in the context of PIAAC in this chapter. However, it is important to note that this chapter, being its own chapter, does not imply that the papers mentioned in the previous chapters do not identify causal effects. On the contrary, no judgment here. Many of these papers use value-added difference in differences or epidemiological frameworks. Instead, this chapter simply picks out two further papers that illustrate different pathways to causality that are attractive in the context of PIAAC. Now, causality is a dangerous topic in combination with survey data. Indeed, lack of experimental variation is often mentioned as an obstacle to using PIAAC or similar data sets. However, even though PIAAC does not have any exogenous variation built into it, there are still ways of integrating it into causal frameworks, as we will see. So one way of doing that is by looking at variation in economic conditions between and within countries that are far beyond the control of the individual surveyed in PIAAC. Let's look at this example from a very recent 2022 paper. Here, Ariano Bover analyzes the role of labor market conditions when young people start their careers on their skills in the long run. And the analysis is based on 19 PIAAC countries this time. So where does the variation of interest come from? Well, the unemployment rate at job entry is out of the control of the individual worker. Even though, and here we need to be careful, the literature shows that workers choose to delay job entry by staying in the education sector longer when conditions are unfavorable. However, despite this phenomenon, by using PIAAC's age structure once again, and variation in the entry conditions, of course, the author finds a negative skill effect in the long run. This is a very simple research design that introduces variation in the timing of recessions to the PIAAC data. And as promised at the end of the last chapter, we come back to PIAAC-L in the context of this paper. While the main analysis is entirely based on PIAAC International, the author uses PIAAC-L to carve out one potential mechanism behind the procyclical skill investments in the labor market that he finds. It may be that firms differ in the skill development opportunities that they offer their employees, and that is behind at least part of the effect that is observed in this paper. Here, we are back to the topic of firm size, essentially. And indeed, in PIAAC-L, those young workers who start at a small firm experience lower skill growth than those at large firms. This suggestive evidence hints that the skill investment opportunity channel could indeed explain part of the skill disadvantage experienced by those starting their careers in bad economic times. So overall, this paper uses variation in the timing of recessions in PIAAC International and backs up the storyline with panel evidence from PIAAC-L. So even in international settings, it can be valuable to zoom in on PIAAC Germany and exploit its panel structure. A similar international and Germany-specific combination strategy is used in the final paper of this online course. PIAAC can also be used in an instrumental variable framework, as this paper shows. It investigates the causal returns to ICT skills in the modern labor market, and thus complements the evidence on returns to classic numeracy skills that we discussed in the very first paper. Here, Falk, Heimisch-Röcker, and Wiederhold look at 19 PIAAC countries, as well as PIAAC Germany, to find substantial wage returns to ICT skills. ICT skills, or information communication technology skills, are measured through the third PIAAC skill dimension, problem solving in technology-rich environments. Now, that might sound complicated at first, but it is really just a beautiful way of capturing ICT skills. For example, people have to navigate a website to find information in one of the ICT tasks. This is a very fitting topic for an online tutorial, actually. Even more interesting than the ICT skill dimension is the identification strategy in this paper. The authors used two instrumental variable strategies based on internet availability. The storyline here is that ICT skills are best acquired through learning by doing. If no broadband or fast internet is available, ICT skills will almost mechanically be lower among the population. Thus, the authors use instrumental variables that isolate variation in ICT skills based on broadband availability due to technological restrictions. Now, this is no technology tutorial, so please refer to the paper for details. What we need to know for our purposes is that they use an instrumental variable approach based on broadband availability in the 19-country PIAAC sample. Then the authors augment that by zooming in on PIAAC Germany, which allows them to use another instrumental variable approach at the municipality level, where the distance to the main distribution frame or the source of the internet significantly affects internet access and, through internet access, ICT skills. So we have two perspectives, two levels of analysis, two instrumental variables combined, and one message: ICT skills pay off in the labor market. While these instruments are naturally very specific to the question at hand, I hope that this will inspire you to look for causal identification strategies that may fit your research question and that can be combined with PIAAC. The existing literature shows that it is possible. And with that, let's summarize what we have learned in these past 3 sessions of the online tutorial. Our first goal for this online tutorial was to understand the potential and the force of the PIAAC data based on the existing evidence. Now, we have seen that PIAAC and PIAAC-L are used in many different economic contexts and to answer a huge variety of questions. First, we looked at some classic PIAAC-related questions, such as the returns to skills in the labor market. We've looked at numeracy skills, and now we've looked at ICT skills. Other papers deal with teacher skills. All of these cognitive skill questions, of course, are at the heart of what you can do with PIAAC. Also, since PIAAC has not just skill information, but also educational information, PIAAC can be used to evaluate different features of education systems in different countries. For instance, we've seen papers that deal with vocational training and the design of entrance exams. At the intersection between education and the labor market, there is a lot of work going on skill mismatch as measured in PIAAC, and there are different approaches, and there's a lot to explore regarding skill use on the job, etc. Also, we've looked at recessions and on-the-job training in the context of the labor market. For on-the-job training, there is a PIAAC-L study that we discussed. So PIAAC-L is also being used in labor and education economics. But as we established, there is still a lot of untapped potential, specifically in the context of PIAAC-L, the German PIAAC panel. We've also looked at some papers that deal with migration and culture in the context of PIAAC. There is quite a lot going on there, given that PIAAC identifies migrants through language spoken at home, but most importantly, country of birth. So there is also some evidence on that, and many of these papers combine a variety of different strategies that may be useful for your research purposes as well. Finally, there's also survey methodology papers that use PIAAC and, in one particular case, combine it with administrative information. Okay, so there is lots of questions that we can work on based on PIAAC data. However, of course, with every research project, there are practical issues to consider. And our second goal was to look at the resources that are provided in the published existing papers that can help you make informed decisions in your PIAAC data analysis. We have seen that lots of these papers, of course, are dealing with the skill measures. So how are we using plausible values in applied economic research in practice? How are we weighting? How does standardization work and which level of standardization makes sense for what question? You can find a lot of guidance on that in the existing literature that we discussed. Of course, those papers that don't just look at cognitive skills are handling other key variables, such as wage information or the education information, or the migration status. Some of these variables differ between countries, and you need to be careful when analyzing and managing the information. Again, there are papers that show you how to do that and explain their approaches in detail. Of course, from these papers, you can also learn how to handle subsample analyses and how to combine PIAAC with other data sources, which works at the country level, at the municipality level, or regional level specifically in PIAAC International. It can also work at the education group level. So PIAAC can really be combined with a lot of other data sources from the OECD and beyond. And then finally, of course, the papers that use PIAAC-L provide important resources regarding how to manage and use this particular data set that is available for Germany. So there is a lot out there already in the PIAAC literature. There is a lot of guidance to be found that helps you address the practical issues that are relevant in your research context. And with that, I thank you for participating in this online tutorial. You can find the links to all chapters below. And I wish you all the best in your PIAAC-based research. I hope you have learned that PIAAC has a lot of potential, some limitations, of course, and that it may be useful in a variety of different research questions, and that there is a lot of practical guidance out there that is just waiting for you to use it. Thank you for participating.